We're going to lean into risk appetite, which is something that every organisation will usually have documented. But I think it's fair to say it's much more difficult to embed it within that decision-making process. So my first question, I'm going to direct to you, Suzanne. How do you turn risk appetite from a document into something that leaders can actually use and help form their decisions?
I think there's two key things. First of all, it needs to be decision grade. What does it lead to in terms of outcomes and making decisions? Does it enable someone in the business to say, okay, we're happy to take this level of risk in this particular opportunity? Does it help them in doing that? And then secondly, another point is it has to be measurable. You must be able to connect risk appetite to thresholds, to KRIs, to control indicators, instead of just having, you need your qualitative statements, you need your quantitative levels, but it really has to be very measurable. It's not enough just to say, we have no appetite for this. You need to accept a certain amount of risk. And then leading on to another point, which is closely linked with risk appetite, which we might go on to a bit more later, is risk acceptance. So we'll accept some level of risk in terms of processing errors, for example.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Have you or anybody else on the panel maybe got an example where risk appetite has genuinely influenced like a commercial decision for the businesses that you've worked for?
So I think for me, I've worked in a number of institutions, family-owned institutions, where risk appetite is the other way, where it's set so high and it's so conservative that it doesn't actually lead to any challenge and impact. But I think one, especially now with the rules in banking on capital and liquidity, we've had a lot of discussions. I could think of one specific institution where liquidity considerations meant that if we wanted to deliver our strategy, or the 5-year plan, a stretch 5-year plan, we needed to have better liquidity. So that led to us actually setting up an online deposit product and line. So putting a brand new line of business out there to enable us to have that liquidity to enable us to deliver. So that was a good example.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Any other examples or stories that we can share around risk appetite framing commercial decisions?
I think risk impacting, it leads back to the wider impact on strategy, but in terms of decision making, if it's things to do with capital allocation, change prioritization, or meeting regulatory expectations, then risk appetite and risk management really have a steer on how the business operates and what decisions are made.
Yeah, totally. I think particularly, I think at the top level of, say, financial services and so on, this is a very well-trodden path. But I think in a lot of small and medium-sized and younger, less mature enterprises, the risk appetite discussion, it can be a little poor and a little bit suboptimal, and it's very easy to hide behind words. Oh, we have low appetite for fraud or something. Well, of course you do, but what does that mean? Or low appetite for cyber risk and so on. Well, then don't connect to the internet if you don't want. And I think we need, it's important, it's one of my favorite things to do, actually, to go in and work with an organization and really help it sharpen and hone its risk appetite and what that genuinely means in terms of, how much are you prepared to lose in this space, whether that's in terms of, losses, fines, whatever it is, in terms of business disruption, how long could you tolerate this function being out of service, or in terms of reputation, just how big a headline are you prepared to tolerate, and for how long, and what that impact might mean on your organization. And exactly as Suzanne said, it has real impact, right, in terms of it directs what different parts of the organization can and can't do, and that cascade is so important. I think one of the best examples that I saw was, so I was CRO at a fintech, and our chairperson was CRO of the parent organization, but he was also a former banker, and therefore very, very comfortable in having real conversations. So one of the most empowering things he said, we were launching a new product, it was somewhat untested, and he said, how much do we think we could lose in this space? How about we set a threshold? We know we need to go out. We know we need to learn. We need to accumulate customers and data and examine behavior. So, okay, let's set a threshold of £1 million. Tell me when you're halfway there. Tell me when you're 3/4 of the way there. Keep the board informed, but within those parameters, go and execute and learn and drive new business. And that was the most empowering thing that we could have, right? Because we were being given freedom within a framework. We were being given limits. We had thresholds set, and that allowed us to really go and move fast with clarity and with pace.
I feel as well in organizations with more mature risk frameworks, risk is sometimes the voice that says to the business, come on, you can take a bit more risk here. You're being too cautious. And I think that's really a really key thing to remember when you're talking about the influence of risk on strategy.
And it's transformational, isn't it? You know, when the eyes turn and they go, oh my God, the risk person has just told us we can take a bit more risk, or the risk person has just told us that there's like a redundant control over there that we can get rid of because we've improved in some way. And I think it's really important, if you can, obviously, you know, the situation has to be right, but to you know, pleasantly surprise your colleagues and show that risk can work in both ways, and it can be an enabler as well as, you know, as well as an upper limit and a barrier.
And having risk professionals within organizations who are commercially minded.